debate. I recognize a member from Windsor West.
Thank you, Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise on behalf of my constituents of Windsor West. I was hoping to speak to Bill 177, the Stronger, Fairer Ontario Act, also known as budget measures. But as the member before me had pointed out, this is the second time in 7 days that I am standing here talking about the fact that the government doesn't want to talk about a bill they brought forward. And you've got to wonder, I know my constituents wonder, but you've got to wonder the validity of the legislation the government's bringing forward when the government doesn't even want to talk about it. If they're bringing proposed legislation forward and they really feel that it's good legislation, it's strong legislation, and it's really going to help the people of this province, you would think they want to talk about it as much as they possibly can. We all know they go out and trumpet what they see as successes, but when it comes to talking about something like Bill 177, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to debate it. They don't want to hear from the members of this side of the House. They don't even want to hear from their own members and the constituents they represent. Because when they time allocate, when they move to time allocate and shut down debate, clearly they're saying to their own constituents, to the government's constituents, we don't want to hear from you. And that's really unfortunate, because really what they could be doing is bringing forward legislation that has some really good pieces in it that are actually going to help the people of Ontario, but instead they chose to bring forward a bill that really isn't about what it says it's about, and then shut down debate. So I want to point out that Bill 177 addresses 46 schedules and 16 agencies are affected. But as my colleague from Kitchener-Waterloo pointed out in debate last week, almost half of the 46 schedules have almost nothing to do with the province's financial systems. Nothing. And yet they call it Stronger, Fairer Ontario Act or budget measures. Bill 177 is a Budget Measures Act. It should be dealing primarily with budgetary items, but it doesn't, which is probably why the government doesn't want to talk about it. In fact, there are some aspects of this bill that actually have nothing to do with budgetary measures, like recognizing the City of Ottawa as having 2 official languages. What does that have to do with the financial situation in the province of Ontario? What does that actually have to do with the finances or the budget of the province of Ontario? And it's great that Ottawa has 2 official languages. That's something one of their members could have got up and mentioned in a member statement. It doesn't have to be worked into a budget bill. There are also some strange provisions in Schedule 38, which deals with the services and supports to promote social inclusion of persons with Developmental Disabilities Act. And I have to tell you, Speaker, at first I was thrilled to hear that the government had actually worked something in for people with developmental or intellectual disabilities into a financial bill, into a budget bill. Then I saw that one of the 3 provisions in Schedule 38 was simply correcting a mistake in the French language section of the bill, and I'm still wondering what that has to do with the budgetary policy. It's just frankly, another omnibus bill. So they pulled in everything but the kitchen sink, although who knows, the kitchen sink may be in here. And they've thrown it all into one bill, and they're trying to push it through and tell the people of the province it's all about the finances and the budget of the province, when really it has nothing to do with it. Now, Speaker, going back to the fact that at least they mentioned services and supports to promote the social inclusion of persons with developmental disabilities, sparks another conversation, because we are talking about a budgetary bill. And yet we have a province, we have a government who has not increased the base funding for agencies that actually support persons with developmental disabilities. They haven't increased funding in almost a decade. So they've brought forward bills since then talking about labour reform. They've listened to New Democrats in the push to make sure that people are making a decent minimum wage, and yet they have done nothing to actually support these agencies in a financial manner to make sure that they are still able to service people with developmental disabilities. There is nothing in this bill that will actually see more funding flow to these organizations so that they can continue to provide the supports and services that they do. There's nothing in this bill for the people who are on a wait list, thousands of people on a wait list for supportive housing. Nothing. There's nothing in this bill that puts more money into the system, a system, again, that has not seen base funding increases. Nothing that has gone into this bill to talk about the thousands of people languishing on a wait list to receive passport funding so they can actually go out and get services to help those with developmental or intellectual disabilities. So, frankly, Speaker, and I had probably more notes than I needed for the time that I have, but I want to go over their schedule for committee, because this just speaks to, because last week when I was speaking to time allocation or closure motion, a member from the government side had said it needs to go to committee, and I talked about the farce that committee is. It's a farce because the Liberal government gives people very little notice to get their names in to be able to present to committee. They often only do committee here in Toronto, which can be a burden for people that live down my way, down in the far south of Ontario. It can be a burden for the people up north to get here in the timelines that the government has prescribed. And so I want to read out what their plans are for committee, just to make that point. And I should point out that people usually have 5 minutes to present. So if you're someone coming from the north and you have to take multiple modes of transportation to get here, sometimes it can take 15 hours. And sometimes the weather isn't the greatest. You're going to have 5 minutes to talk to the committee, and each representative from each party is going to have about 3 minutes to ask you a question, and then your time is done. Government doesn't want to travel the committee, though, to talk to people. So late last night, the government shared with us their timeline for the legislation. The government has allocated 1 day of hearings and 1 day of clause-by-clause study. We have 46 schedules impacting 16 agencies, and the government is only giving the committee and stakeholders 2 days to hammer out all the details. Then they decided on 1 hour of debate at third reading. 1 hour of debate. Oh my God. So now they're shutting down debate right now on the bill because they don't want to talk about it, and then they're rushing through committee, and when it comes back for third reading, they only want to give 1 hour for debate. It's very clear they don't want to hear from the opposition members. They don't want to hear from our constituents. They don't even want to hear from their own constituents. They have constituents that have concerns about this as well. They have constituents who want to be heard, and yet they don't want to give them the opportunity to do that, Speaker. It's completely unacceptable, and it completely undermines our democracy. We in this House, 107 of us, think about that. Out of all the people in the province, there are 100 as of right now. Next election, that number will go up a bit. But as of right now, there are only 107 people that have the opportunity and, frankly, the honor to do what we do, to come into this place to represent our constituents and bring forward the voice of those people that we represent. And the government is very clear in their stance that they don't want to hear from my constituents. They don't want to hear from the constituents from Oshawa. They don't want to hear from any of the constituents represented by the Conservative members. And even more shameful, the people that voted to send the Liberal members here, those members don't want to hear from their constituents either. They don't want to actually bring their voice to the legislature. They just want to toe the party line and do what they're told to do over there. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to actually bring forward the voice of their constituents. And that is shameful. Again, it is an incredible honor to be one of 107 people who have the opportunity to do what we do here And they are wasting that opportunity on the other side of the House by not engaging in a fulsome debate and by not giving the people that they represent the opportunity to come to committee and actually have an opportunity to be heard. Thank you, Speaker.